while we wait on Sarah, should I get started with the technical rules related to Zoom?
Greetings. We're going to proceed without Sarah. She's going to join when she can.
Okay.
Mhm.
Then I'll
So,
just let participants
yeah.
know.
You can give your speech. Thank you.
So if this is your first time joining us, everyone will remain muted throughout the meeting except committee co-chairs Andrea and Sarah and the presenters of today. And following the presentation, co-chairs will call on members of public wishing to speak. You can participate by going to reaction icon, pressing raise hand, and only press it once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go down. And if you're on the phone, it is *9 to raise hand and *6 to unmute. And be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once the co-chairs call on you. And the chat is for technical support only. The co-chairs will not see your chat. And if you have an older version of Zoom, you will need to go on the participant section where you'll find the raise hand feature. And once again, me and Will are here to support.
Thank you so much. All right. We can get rid of the screen, the display. Thank you. All right. Computer. All right. So greetings all. Welcome to our Social Justice Committee meeting of Community Board 8. I am one of the co-chairs as well as Sarah Chu. She will be joining us as soon as she can. She's doing some very essential, important work with legislation, and she definitely is needed where she's at. I like to say Happy New Year to everyone. This is our first meeting in January, so I guess we'll stop saying that in February, right? Everybody should. So I'm excited about tonight. Just to make a note, during the Q&A session, can we have Erica unmuted, but she still would need to raise her hand to ask questions and stuff like that, but you can keep her unmuted during the Q&A session. Okay, for us. And you can unmute Eliza as well, because she'll be presenting to us tonight. So once again, welcome all. I'm excited tonight to have Eliza Orleans. I hope I said her name right. A lawyer, public defender with the Legal Aid Society. She also ran a dynamic campaign for Manhattan District Attorney. I was privileged to be in a virtual space with her with the Democratic Club, East Harlem Dems, early in the race. And she was one of the people I was taking notes on. I took quite a bit of notes on a few, not everybody. So she was in my note taking. So I'm excited about that. She also is a television star. So we have some notoriety here, and, you know, Survivor, and Amazing Race, and I'll leave it at that. But without further ado, she will continue to introduce herself, give us a little brief as long as she desires, tell us what she does and so forth, to kickstart this off. And then after she finished speaking and presenting to us her dialogue, her commentary, the work that she does that's so amazing and so needed in such a time like this, we will jump into our Q&A session. So once again, welcome all, and the floor is yours. Eliza.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with all of you, and really grateful for the time that you spend talking about these really just critical issues for our city, for public safety, for humanity, for human rights, for all of these things. And it's just so important. And so thanks for having me tonight. And I know that there are differing levels of familiarity with the criminal legal system. So I was asked to give a little bit of background. So for some of you, I know this is probably going to be redundant and you completely understand. I mean, I see Billy Freeland on here. I know he himself has taken on pro bono criminal defense cases, and so fully understands this. And then there are others who may be less familiar with exactly what I do. But aside from, yes, my campaign last year for Manhattan District Attorney, I've been a public defender for the last it's my 13th year. So I've represented over 3,000 people who've been charged with crimes right here in Manhattan who couldn't afford to hire a lawyer. Most people are familiar with this from television, scripted television, which I think is probably a pretty unfair portrayal of what public defenders do. But you've probably heard Miranda warnings read, which are, you have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one, one will be provided for you. Well, that's us. That's public defenders. And we pick up cases and arraignments. I work night court probably, 9 times a quarter. So, dozens of shifts a year where I arraign people who've been arrested in the last 24 hours. So, arraigning hundreds of cases every year, people from everything from as little as taking up 2 seats on a subway car, which, now thankfully under this new DA and even towards the end of Vance's administration, we were seeing less prosecuted. But, I think we've all seen the horrific videos of times when police officers, NYPD goes onto the train, sees someone sleeping on the train, or even sees someone with a bag next to them on the train. I had a client who was an assistant manager at Gristedes in Lower Manhattan taking the A train home, who literally had his bags on the seats next to him. And at the 125th Street stop, 2 uniformed officers got on the train, grabbed his groceries, dumped them to the ground, and arrested him and took him to jail for the night for the crime of occupying multiple seats on a transit facility. And DA Vance his office wrote up that case. My client spent the night in jail. He lost his groceries. He lost a day of work. And meanwhile, the city of New York, our taxpayer money, $1,266 a night went to incarcerating that man. And now the costs are even higher. $1,500 a night to put someone on Rikers Island. And so, the reason why I ran for district attorney and the reason why we are thankfully talking about these issues is because I think that there are so many ways in which the criminal legal system just destroys lives with impunity, that prosecutors for far too long have had this unbelievable power in the decisions they've made with the cases that they choose to prosecute, the charges that they choose to bring, the offers that are made, especially given mandatory minimums and the coercive nature of plea bargaining. And not to mention, of course, one that gets talked about a lot in our city, money bail, cash bail. And I've had clients sit at Rikers Island. I have clients sitting at Rikers Island right now who cannot afford to pay bail, who are literally there because they're too poor to buy their freedom. And this is something that happens routinely in any jurisdiction where there still remains money bail, that people who have wealth and privilege and power get to remain free, get to actually exercise their real presumption of innocence. But when you're sitting behind bars for, months or even years waiting for your day in court, it really does coerce plea bargains. It really does create a different standard of justice for those who can't afford to pay bail. And so I think that, I'm so glad that these conversations are coming to the forefront. It is extremely concerning the way in which some of them are covered by the media. I think that, we're seeing the way in which DA Bragg, who, by the way, I don't even agree with on 100% of his policies, but I feel compelled to stand up for him because, I think that the way in which the media is eviscerating him for some of these policies is really unfair. It's really intellectually dishonest. It's not the reality of the situation. It's not, covering it in a way that adequately describes the challenges that are being faced by the city, by the criminal legal system. And it really does address some of the absolutely unfettered power that the prosecutor has. And I want to delve into more detail about all of these things. I know I just covered a lot of topics in the last few minutes, but I really would love to make this more of an open discussion if people have questions. And if you don't have questions, I'm happy to just keep talking because I can talk about this stuff forever. But wanted to at least open the floor and see if people had a few questions to at least have this discussion go in whatever way this group wants it to. And then I'm happy to continue talking about things.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So everyone knows, and if you don't know, use the raise hand function and we will call on you. And thank you for that. I'll reserve questions for later, being that I'm a co-chair, but I would like to just, if you can just touch on briefly, you were part of the transition team with the district attorney, Manhattan district attorney. Can you just shed a little light on that? And then we'll jump into the questions. Like, how was it? what was some of the things you did to help society?
So I signed a confidentiality agreement, so I can't talk about the specifics of the transition team, but I can say, and especially if you saw the press release as to who was on it and some of the people who DA Bragg has brought on for his administration. There were public defenders and people who worked with the Innocence Project. Dr. Bedard at Correctional Health, who's done incredible work with people who are incarcerated at Rikers, who are dealing with medical issues and compassionate release. So some really incredible people. It was very heartening in a lot of ways. But in a lot of ways, even in my small transition committee, fighting to say, hey, wait a minute, why do we have to make this assumption? There are certain assumptions made because that's the way things have always been done. It did make me recognize just how entrenched some of these policies and beliefs are and how difficult of a road it is to making real change.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And I'm sorry for putting you on the spot.
No, it's okay. I figured.
I just want to put a pin in it that you were part of that. And that's very important. So
it was an honor. It was an honor to be asked. I really,
you're doing the good work. We're grateful. We're grateful. All right. So we'll call on Erica first. And she could remain unmuted during this session part, but she will have to raise her hand again to ask questions again.
Eliza, I'm so excited that you were able to do this, and Eliza and I got to know each other a bit when she was running, and I've not been shy about the fact that I was supporting her almost from the very beginning. And part of how I've come to all of this is for the last 2 years, I've been a volunteer with Court Watch New York, and we sit. Prior to the pandemic, we would sit in arraignments in Manhattan, Queens, and Brooklyn, because as the saying goes, if people realize they're being watched, they tend to do better. And in the short few months I was able to be in court, I'm not sure I could have been more appalled than I was before I stepped into a courtroom and saw firsthand what goes on, but I was even more appalled seeing it firsthand, even though I'd been reading about it and learning about it for quite some time prior. And fast forward 2 years, we moved it to online watching and have collected a lot of amazing data. But one of the things that I would, Eliza, I would like you to walk this group through is for, many of these low-level offenses, walking this group through what happens when the police are either called to a situation or they stumble upon it in the course of their daily job, and what happens from the time someone is approached, gets arrested, and goes through the process of up to arraignment and potentially afterwards. I want people to understand, and I don't know if some of you are familiar with, from a homeless perspective, Shams de Baron has been in a play that the New York Times wrote up, what it's like to walk in the shoes as a adventure theater production of somebody who is homeless and the choices they have to make on a daily basis. So I'm almost thinking about it like that, like, being in the shoes of the person, what happens, and under, ideal circumstances, what would have happened in that situation, like had the bail reform stuck and not been rolled back.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Erica, thank you. Thanks for your support. You're amazing. And thanks for being a court watcher. And that is something that it is absolutely true when there are people watching, when judges know someone is watching, when DAs know someone is watching, it does change their behavior. And when someone is there in arraignments and that behavior is changed for a bail request, for example, or whether or not bail gets set, or whether someone gets placed on supervised release or allowed to be at liberty during the pendency of their case, we know that that results in much, much, much better outcomes, that cases maybe don't get presented to grand juries, they don't get indicted, that someone gets a better offer, or that the case goes away entirely because they maybe never had their witnesses to begin with, but they would have been able to coerce a plea out of someone if that person sat in jail. So it can change not just the trajectory of the case, but of an individual's life, of their family's lives, of generational trauma. I mean, the going to Rikers Island, especially now, especially with the absolute humanitarian crisis that is occurring there, it has always been a horrible place, but it is truly and genuinely worse than ever. And I really encourage all of you to read the New York Times article about the fight club that is being run there, about the lack of medical care. There are hunger strikers still on hunger strike right now because they don't have access to outdoor time, to the law library, to phone calls, to mail. I mean, to any healthcare, medical care, mental health care, basic human rights. But I can talk more about the process. So when someone is arrested, typically and at least what it had been before appearance tickets and desk appearance tickets were mandated for certain offenses, the person would get brought to the local precinct. They'd spend maybe a handful to a dozen hours there. Then they'd get transported to central booking, which is in the lower levels of 100 Center Street. And then, once their rap sheets come through, they get fingerprinted, et cetera. Once their previous criminal history gets printed out, once they get interviewed by CJA, which is the criminal justice agency, who makes a recommendation as to a bail determination, gives them a certain number of points as to whether or not they're employed, whether they have a phone number, whether they report a New York City address. There are all these different factors that go in. And then, the case gets given to the Early Case Assessment Bureau, referred to as ECAB in the DA's office, who decides whether or not to write up this case and whether to prosecute. Some cases they will decline to prosecute. You'll hear DP. And other cases they will decide to prosecute. They'll write them up. Sometimes they write them up as violent felonies or low-level felonies or misdemeanors or even violations. And then, those cases will be put in a file and they'll be given to the public defender's office. And our office is the primary public defender. The Legal Aid Society represents the overwhelming majority of people who are arrested and prosecuted in our criminal legal system here in Manhattan and across New York City. And we get the cases and arraignments usually they try to keep arraignment times under 24 hours to around 24 hours, which is why we have court 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and 5 p.m. to 1 a.m., 365 days a year. So even if you're not ready to sign up for Court Watch, I would encourage everyone to come watch night court, come watch arraignments, sit there and just see for yourself what is happening, what the DA's office is doing, what's being done with your taxpayer dollars, what cases are being prosecuted, who is being paraded through the courtroom, in handcuffs, in shackles, because I think it's quite an alarming experience and quite jarring for people who've never seen it. And I am so grateful for Court Watchers. You can do a training, you can sign up to be a court watcher, and take notes on what's happening and then publicize it in some way, which really helps overall with that data. But anyhow, when a person then I see the case and I'll pick it up and it'll say John Doe charged with petit larceny 155.25 for shoplifting from a CVS. And I'll go in the back and I'll be like, John Doe. And he'll be like, yeah. And I'm like, come in the second booth. And he's like, my name's Eliza Orleans and I'm going to be your lawyer. And then I interview my client, I speak to them, I put the notice up, and then the case gets called. And now a petit larceny is not eligible for bail, but over the years, in the hundreds of people I've represented who were stealing soap or socks or toothpaste, some of them have faced years in state prison. Some of them have sat at Rikers Island on as little as $250 bail. Judges would call that nuisance bail, not realizing that there are legitimately New Yorkers who cannot afford to pay $250, or that paying $500 would be the difference between their family being on the street or not being able to eat that month. And so the people do sit in jail on these low level amounts of bail, can lose their homes, lose their apartments, lose their jobs because they can't show up for work during that time, and then come out of it and say, you know what, I'll just take a plea. Let me get time served, meaning the time they've already spent in, but they still then leave with a criminal record, the inability to get loans or get jobs or get housing. And it really does destroy lives. So I think that, the way in which Alvin's policy on declining to prosecute certain offenses, or, mine, which would have been more expansive, was really unfair, because it was saying that, oh, it's going to make our city unsafe. But the reality is now the National Bureau of Economic Research has done a study on Rachel Rollins, who's the DA in Boston. And it showed that people who she didn't prosecute on these low-level offenses were in fact less likely to reoffend and more likely to, be able to remain in their homes, remain with their families, and less likely to commit future offenses. So these decline to prosecute policies are a good thing. They keep our city safe. And I think that, we should be advocating for more of that.
So one of the things that I want everybody to keep in mind, that a majority of people on Rikers are pre-trial detention. So there's a presumption still of innocence in our Constitution, but yet you have people sitting there that have not even gone to trial, not been found guilty or innocent, but they're in prison largely because of being unable to afford bail. And it makes no sense to me.
All right. Thank you. Thank you both for giving us this. I'm a little aware of some things because I was a former member of service with NYPD, a civilian supervisor. So DP in cases, I understand. ECAP, all of that language I, was privy to and understand, but it's a lot of jargon that people don't understand, and you really simplified it for those. And, thank you for your service too, Erica. And I must say that Erica was instrumental in helping us get Eliza here. So I don't want to not say that. So thank you again, Erica and Eliza, for joining us. Next up, we will have Barbara Ruda, please. You can unmute her.
Thank you. I will agree with Andrea that you've made it simple, but I'm still very confused. I'm going to ask two unrelated questions. The first one, I don't understand bail, and I guess I have two parts to it. I thought there was bail reform, and then I hear there's reform of the bail reform, and I don't know what the difference is and why things went back. But the main question is, I do listen to media, and to me, they're confusing bail with incarcerating somebody for something that appears to really be dangerous. So bail to me is just about whether you could afford it or not. So Harvey Weinstein, one of my favorite examples, paid bail. He wasn't in jail. He was able to pay bail, even though I don't think anybody here would think that he was an upstanding citizen. And yet somebody that can't afford $50 is in jail for not as dangerous as an area. So I don't understand why we confuse bail with the crime rate going up. So I guess those are my two bail questions. And let me ask, then I have a second question about Rikers. I don't understand why it takes so long to go from jail to having a trial. As was said, you're presumed innocent and so on, but you're thrown in jail. Why can't it be that no longer than a week that you're there? And I've heard different stories and different things about what's going on. Is it that we don't have enough judges, that we don't have enough defense attorneys, that I don't understand why it has to take, and I gather sometimes years. And I mean, from what I feel, we could even add, Eliza, to the people that are affected. If you can't pay child support if you're in jail, when you get out, you can't go to public housing because you have a criminal record. If your mother or wife or whatever allows you in, they could be prosecuted. It's just horrible. And yet the truth is we all want to be safe, and we want to know that if somebody is doing something that's dangerous, they in fact are separated from society until it's determined, but not after years. So those are my two confusions. One is about bail. Why is it the media can connect bail with people that are doing something dangerous, when to me it's apples and oranges? And why can't we make Rikers a much faster process along the way? Simple questions, I know, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, but Barbara, they show such a actually phenomenal understanding of what these issues are, because I think that the way that you said it is exactly right. And I use the Harvey Weinstein example quite frequently myself. You know, Harvey was charged with he was actually charged with the highest level felony you can be charged with. He was facing a mandatory life sentence had he been convicted on the predatory sexual assault top charge. And yet he was able to come in with a prearranged set bail of, I think it was $1 million. He paid bond. He was able to be released. He did not spend one night in jail, not one night, until after a jury had unanimously found him guilty of crimes. So he was no longer, you know, it wasn't presumption of innocence. This was somebody who was convicted by a jury. Not to say that juries are infallible, they're not, but he had already been convicted and he had not spent one single night in jail, despite the fact that he was charged with a violent sexual assault. He was charged with something which would be facing a life sentence, and he was able to remain at liberty the entire time because he could afford to buy his freedom. That's a perfect example. And the exact, you know, the exact reasoning why I think we should be just ending money bail, that the bail reform, not only with the rollbacks horrendous, but even the original bail reform didn't go far enough, that we need to truly end money bail and say, you know, this should not be a system that exists, because all it does is lock people up who cannot afford to buy their freedom. And it's just,
I thought we did though, didn't we? I thought we did end bail. No?
No.
Okay.
No, nope. And so I think there is a misperception there. And you said, you know, the question about why the media conflates these things, why the media covers it this way. I don't know. I think it sells papers, it gets clicks. It is something that is, this is a PR problem as much as it is, more so than it is well, I mean, it's definitely a real problem, like that this exists, but the media coverage of it, I think, does a real disservice to people who are trying to understand these issues in a nuanced way and really what's going on here. And then as to your second question with regards to speedy trial and why can't it be a week? Well, that's also a matter of changing the law. Right now, the law provides for 90 days for misdemeanor cases and 6 months for felonies in terms of speedy trial time under, you know, CPL 3030, we call it 3030 time. And however, that's like minus excludable time. And there are all these things that need to happen, and their motion practice and everything else. And I can tell you, you know, some of my cases 1 week into when I've picked them up would seem a lot worse than they did a year later. But of course, don't want my clients sitting at Rikers for that year. But that's, again, why I think that the presumption of innocence, that really we should incarcerate virtually no one pre-trial, because, you know, if you are presumed innocent, you should be able to remain at liberty while you fight your case, because speedy trial, if people are not sitting at Rikers, is much less of an issue.
Even if somebody has a gun, like even if somebody is definitely dangerous and is a rape cases or something, there are dangerous people.
Harvey Weinstein was a rape case. I mean, like, Harvey Weinstein was at liberty, but he was a rich white man. And the standard under the law in New York is whether or not someone is likely to return to court, whether they are going to return for their court dates. And you know, that can't be based on things like the nature of the crime, even though that is something that is often taken into account, because the judges or DAs will say, well, because they're facing X amount of time, we should be able to use that as a reason why to set bail. And I actually think it's quite the opposite. You know, some of my cases where clients have been facing the most time, who've been at liberty, they've been the clients who are most likely to show up because they have the most to lose if that case goes forward in their absence. They understand the consequences and quite how serious that is for them not to show up for their court dates. I had a client who showed up to the court with COVID, and I was like, what are you doing here? And he's like, but I have a court date. Like, I thought I had to be here. And these are, it's clients who are facing serious time, who understand just how important it is that they show up. And the fact is, these are people who are presumed innocent. And if they're represented by a public defender, they're indigent by New York State standards, and they're not people who should be, locked up because of their poverty.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that question and clearing that up for those that are not aware and, those that are viewing. It's good information. I'm still going to pause my questions and go to Boaz Galley. I can't see that well. It's this participant, but yeah. Forgive me if I pronounced your last name.
No, you pronounce it better than my mother. It's Boaz Galil. Thank you very much. Eliza, it's nice hearing you. I followed you in the past. I'm a big supporter. My question is around homeless, the situation of homeless and specific, and it's not only a question to you, but a question to the community board. It seems like the homeless situation in Upper East Side is getting out of control. For example, if you are talking about the entrance to the second, to the Q train on 94, 96 station, up until the summer, there was a guy, there was a camping of one guy living there. I reported many times to 311, to the Department of Homeless. They haven't done anything. But, and just like I've seen in the past, basically what happened was that the homeless situation has been increased, meaning that now there is another guy living there in the entrance of the station, and slowly will be another guy. And this is just one corner. You see it all over the place. And they use the parks as their bathroom. It's a problem. And my question is basically what's the solution, right? What's the solution? What's the approach for the short term and for the long term? And this is a question to you and basically to the community board. I see a lot of the people from the community board are talking about Rikers and this, but I'm curious if they are doing anything about the public safety and what's going on in their area. So thank you very much again for hearing my question. Thank you.
Boaz, thanks for that question. And it's always nice to meet supporters, and thanks for supporting. This is a question that I think is on the minds of so many New Yorkers. And I think that it's something that I can't say that I have the perfect answer to. I think about this in terms of being a public defender. I've represented so many clients who are experiencing homelessness and who've basically been prosecuted, been targeted by the police, been dehumanized by our criminal legal system and by the fact that we have no public bathrooms. It's really upsetting. I don't think that if you speak to anyone that there's anyone who wants to use the bathroom on the street or in the subway. I think that there are so many reasons why homelessness has become a problem, why there are more New Yorkers experiencing homelessness, and why our congregate shelters are certainly not the answer, that those are places that have been breeding grounds for COVID, that have been, dangerous, that have not addressed this issue in a real way. I have clients who I get them out of jail. It's a code blue night. It's 12 degrees outside. And the only thing I can say is you need to go to Bellevue Men's Shelter because that's the intake shelter. You have to go to 30th Street and do that. And they're like, I don't want to go there. Honestly, I'd rather go try to find my way into an ATM vestibule and just sleep there for the night until they open in the morning and kick me out, so I don't freeze to death overnight because I don't want to go to the shelter. And so, this is obviously a huge problem, but this is something that is a public health crisis. I think, in terms of allocating resources to deal with this, I think that for me, I know I come at this from a different perspective than a lot of New Yorkers, as we saw protests in last year where people didn't want people who are experiencing homelessness to receive hotel rooms, to receive other things. But these are issues that are too big to ignore. This is housing is a human right. We are failing tens of thousands of our fellow New Yorkers every single day. And we really need to not just say things like housing is a human right, but we need to make that slogan a reality and make it so that people are eligible. And there are some people who are experts on housing. I don't purport to be one of them, but I do think things like a 100% affordable World Trade Center, WTC, 5 WTC, that at least in lower Manhattan is something that's being discussed a lot. Like having 100% affordable buildings is incredibly important. Having places where people can live, the big expose on the way in which if someone's actually calling to try to get an apartment and then finding out that all of these landlords were saying, oh, you have a voucher, actually this apartment's not available, click. Like that's what's really happening. So vouchers are not going to be the answer, right? Like there needs to be something that gives renters the same benefit as homeowners in terms of tax deduction, in terms of all these things that are beyond the scope of what I'm here to talk about. But I do think that we're clearly having a housing crisis, that we need to do things to address it. And I'm sure that there are people on this call who are extremely knowledgeable about this and can answer it far better than I can. But the answer is, what I can tell you the answer is not, is involving the police, involving the criminal legal system, locking people up. If you really think about the fact of it costing $1,500 a night to send someone to Rikers Island and how that money could be used to make it so that each person in New York had a home. And it's like, that should be the answer. We need to be thinking about creating more housing. And obviously that's not something that we can just snap our fingers and do, but there are so many exclusionary policies in our city that have made it so that people are being priced out of their homes. And we need to stand up for New Yorkers who don't have homes.
Thank you very much for the answer. And yeah, I hope to hear more from the community board. What are they doing regarding the homeless crisis? It's a crisis. I know Rikers have their own crisis, but the community board number 8 is their bread and butter is the Upper East Side. And I would like to hear more about what they are doing regarding the homeless situation and about the public safety. So thank you, Aliza.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for the phenomenal response, Eliza. I know that, I'll just jump in real quick. There is a safe haven that is being built and might be opening maybe this year or next year for people that are unhoused in our community. And it's about 80 beds, 80 rooms, give or take, male and or female. It's not families. So we are doing something over here. Some of us are part of the stakeholder committee.
I'm working on that too.
We're in that. We are in that. And, thanks to Ben Kalos and others that, our former city council member and others that have worked on that. And there has been a lot of resistance. And then the second point is, people rather be in the streets, in the subways, and live in a shelter. The shelters are unsafe. And during COVID, they're even horrible because you can get sick in there. And then we have to look at what our city is doing and not doing. There's families, and I don't have the exact statistics. If there's a statistician can give them out. I was told by people that were homeless, that I know personally, that are no longer homeless, that it used to cost $3,000 a month to keep their family in a shelter. When you think about that, that's somebody's mortgage, right? Or that's somebody's rental of the apartment. So if the city can do that, that's wasting money. People that really can be in there, that have to be in there temporarily. It should be a temporary, and it should be a transition. And there's money over hand, over foot. So it's a business, like prisons is a business. So it's a business that is harming people that are poor, basically. Our judicial system, our unhoused, our homeless crisis, all these people are suffering because they're poor. When I was in Alliance Theological Seminary, one of my colleagues in there was a military lady. I forgot the branch of service. She was homeless, and she actually was in a shelter, and it was crimes being committed in the shelter. I believe she was in the Navy or Army, but I don't want to say offhand. And just to hear some of the stories that she would say, but she had nowhere to go. And this is somebody that served this country that was in a shelter, you know. So what are we doing as a country? What are we doing to combat these societal issues? You know, we all can do our part. We can't do everything, but everybody should have something. If we care about these issues, pick a problem and get involved. You know, it's so much to change the society, and we all can do our part. You know, like I said, you can't do everything. I won't list everything I do, but I'm with housing. I'm with, you know, Black Lives Matter. I'm with a lot of things. I'm about, you know, social justice, period. But everybody can't do that. And I get that, but pick something that you can make a change, not just on the Upper East Side, but in this city and in this country, because it's going to be us that's going to make the change. We're going to have to push back. We're going to have to push against these things. But like I said, $3,000 to house a family for months, years, it's unimaginable. And we have vacant apartments in these buildings, even on the Upper East Side, that they're writing taxes off. They can put people in there. Nobody wants to be in the subway. Nobody wants to be. I took pictures. I started doing a little thing I was putting on Twitter and social media, just snapping a picture, not getting anybody's face, giving a location of where somebody, and like the gentleman said, Boaz is right near where our Chase used to be, but not really, right by our 96th Street, but I think that's a 94th Street, right by the Starbucks. The man is tinted out there, you know, and it's disheartening to see that on the Upper East Side. I mean, he's tinted out. And the day that people complain enough and the police come harass him, they throw away all their items. You know, they criminalize them and throw away all their items. I mean, what kind of world are we living in? So, you know, we want to make change. Let's make change together. Sarah's here. Hi, Sarah. Co-chair's here. So gonna jump in.
So Andrea, if I unmuted Russell in case he wanted to respond to that as well. But I would also just say calling 311 is a very valuable thing. Every time you call 311 to report a person who looks to be in need of a social worker from the Department of Homeless Services, they go out there, they do meet with that person, and they extend the invitation to come in. It usually takes 100 times for them to make that offer, and it takes building beds and it takes a lot of other things. But calling 311 or using the app is a great way. Instead of, you know, taking a photo and putting it on Twitter, if you need to take a photo, you can use the app on 311, and you describe the way the person's dressed, and within an hour a social worker from the city goes out and tries to extend that person some services. You know, they are entitled to shelter, they're entitled to food, and all the other things that they're entitled to as New Yorkers, because they are our neighbors and they are New Yorkers as well. And so making that little effort, it sounds like a lot sometimes, but it really is quick. Do the app 311 and let the city do their job, let the social workers who are really valuable do their job to go out there and talk to them. And as you know, Eliza said, it's not a crime to be homeless, to experience homelessness. And so we need to do the best we can to offer them the services. And 311 is really and truly the best way you can do that. Sorry, Russell, if you wanted to say anything else.
Well, thanks. Yeah, no, I mean, I think Sandra really covered it. So
I think Billy's had his hand up for.
Yeah, but I wanted to just put a pin in something. I use Twitter and social media because we get traction that way, sadly. That's what people and activists and organizers have to do. And we get traction and we get media. And for that man that's in that tent on 94th Street, I'm sure people have been out there to see him. He doesn't want to go in the shelter, most likely, because it's unsafe and it's COVID. So what is the solution then? What is the city doing then? So, you know, everybody has their way of advocating, and I think there's no right or no wrong way. You do what you do. But I've been doing stuff for over a decade in advocacy, and I do what my spirit leads me to do. And I also referred somebody to a pantry that has worked with people that are unhoused recently, and I reached out to them. The new pantry that's been there on 91st Street for about almost 2 years now. And I reached out to the pastor there to look out for a gentleman that I talked to and I prayed with that I know in the street that's homeless now. So I referred him over there. So, you know, but yeah, there's other options, you know, emailing your governor, 311, whatever you choose to use. I use pictures, it's documentation, and it gets traction because we need to see, everybody needs to see what's happening on the Upper East Side and everywhere else. Because it's not a crime and it's sad, you know, to for people to be like this. But they don't want to go nowhere. So what, even when the social workers come out, they're still in lobbies of buildings, living in staircases. They don't want to go into the shelter. So what is the solution?
Yes, but Twitter doesn't actually send a social worker out there. So 311 is the way to get a social worker to meet with that person and offer them services.
I understand what you're saying about Twitter, but I get responses on Twitter too from the public advocate and so forth. So, you know, because who I am. But thank you for that. Russell, did you want to chime in?
I think you really covered it. I mean, I was just to the point that you just made, I think with the safe haven, I'm glad that you brought that up. The real problem, or one of the big problems, is people not wanting to go to shelters. And so to have a facility like a safe haven that people are going to be more willing to go to and more open to going to, I think is a big part of solving the issue. And so that's what I'm excited it's going to be coming once it does it.
Yeah.
If I could just add something before we go to Billy. I apologize for being late. I was held up at work and I'm thrilled to be here. I just wanted to point out something that I think is kind of a theme from what I've heard from Eliza's comments, is that that it feels like when we're addressing people on a humane level, that we do that individually and we think about their individual existing needs and how, and we see what might be happening as a need that needs to be addressed. And that so many of our solutions are about warehousing and congregating people, whether that's in jail or that's in shelters, that don't actually serve people and address their needs. And in those settings, there tends to be less safety than what might otherwise be a more humane solution. And so as we're thinking about existing problems and policy solutions that can address them, that I think solutions that tend to throw people into kind of giant buckets and deal with them in giant buckets are ones that we should be interrogating, and about how they impact the human and what and whether that's actually going to be solving the problem. So I apologize. So you have a question for Eliza.
Hi, Eliza. And before I ask you my question, I just to Boaz, I hope you'll consider coming to a couple other committees we have. We have a housing committee that I hope will tackle some of these issues, as well as a committee Barbara co-chairs, Health, Seniors, and Social Services, which is the committee that heard the Safe Haven proposal and also has addressed other proposals like the very successful Women in Need shelter in our community. And there's just a lot of ways that the board's been working on these issues. So, and I'm always happy to be a resource if you'd ever like to chat about ways to get more involved, because I care a lot about this in particular. So my email is freeland@cb8m.com. Eliza, there's so much I want to ask you, but in the interest of time, let me just ask this one, which is, can you talk a little bit about both what the data show and what your experience has borne out about the connection between pretrial incarceration and recidivism? In other words, I mean, as you know, but others may not, the likelihood that someone will be once again caught up in the criminal justice system, and what bearing does pretrial incarceration have on that, given that I think we all have this interest in making sure that we are safe, that people are not getting caught up in criminal justice in all of its facets. So what does that look like based on the data and what you've seen as a public defender?
Thanks for that question, Billy, and thanks for your constant civic engagement to better our city. for everyone. And it's something I touched on briefly in my, opening remarks, but it really is something that couldn't be more critical, because that's the narrative that we need out there, because the real data, not just the data, but the anecdotal, what we see is all borne out, which is that when people are not incarcerated pre-trial, when they get accused of a crime and they get to remain at liberty, they have better outcomes in their cases. They are less likely to recidivate, less likely to commit future crimes. They are able to remain in their jobs, in their homes, with their families, providing food for their family, paying their rent, being a productive, member of society. And we are actually making our city safer by not incarcerating people who are merely accused of crimes. So there is, as I mentioned, that there's this very big study that was done in Boston on this issue, but then, New York has put together data on the number of people who reoffend or who reoffend, with a serious offense, who are out. And it's like upwards of 96% of people, or 98%, who are able to return to court, not reoffend, not get rearrested, and remain in their lives. It's so inhumane the way that we incarcerate innocent people, truly innocent people, people who are presumed innocent, who are merely accused of a crime, who sit in jail and have their lives destroyed because they can't afford to pay money bail. It's something that is just such it's not just inhumane, but it's actually making our city less safe. Clients of mine who have been incarcerated pre-trial, who went in when they probably should never have gone in to begin with. They had no criminal records, et cetera, have come out and have been in a much worse position, whether it be because they were then saddled with a criminal record, unable to get a job, unable to remain at their home with their family. Somebody mentioned earlier, I think it may have been Barbara, that people are no longer allowed to reside in NYCHA housing with certain criminal convictions. So it's not just if you are the leaseholder, but it's like clients of mine who are 18, 20, 21 years old, who still live with their moms or their siblings or somebody, cannot live in NYCHA if they have even a 220.03, a possession of a controlled substance misdemeanor case conviction. And they cannot reside in NYCHA. And if they remain in their home with their family, maybe it's the only home they've ever lived in their entire life. If they remain there, not only can they be evicted, but their family can be evicted because they are in that home. And so if you think about how much worse these outcomes can be, and the fact that people who are held in jail have worse outcomes on their cases, receive longer prison sentences, plead guilty to higher offenses, it makes it so much worse for everyone if we incarcerate people pre-trial. So, I can't emphasize that enough. And I hope that you will all spread that message, because I think that so much of we must keep our city safe by locking people up is the narrative. And that isn't how we're going to keep our city safe.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Eliza and Billy, for bringing up that question. I'll go to Julia. And I see Barbara's up next, so Barbara can be after her. Julia, because Barbara already spoke.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi, okay, thank you. I visited a community courthouse, and it was very impressive in terms of it had its own judge, a man who was familiar with the community in which this courthouse was. And I'm thinking that that is a tremendous model that keeps people out of pretrial incarceration. And it was more a community center, really, with many things that really help lives. And I'm wondering how, why is it that we still have, this system?
Julia, that's such a good question. Do you remember which community? Was it Midtown Community Court on 54th Street, or was it Red Hook Community Court? Was it in New York City?
Yeah, it was in one of the boroughs. It was not Manhattan, and it was really remarkable.
Yeah, a lot of what the community courts do, they're amazing. Really, really extraordinary. And it's not just alternatives to it's not just alternatives to detention that they provide, which is like the pretrial, but it's really, they do provide alternatives to incarceration, meaning then people can receive services that actually put them on a better path rather than just incarcerating them as a sentence, somebody who in fact is going to plead guilty, let's say. And so it's really, the work that they do is extraordinary. And, if we have a few minutes, I will tell a brief story. I represented a young woman who, when I picked up her case, was certainly guilty of the crime that she was charged with. She was a young woman who'd recently come out to her family. And as we know, a lot of LGBTQ youth are people who are not necessarily accepted by their family. They actually have the highest likelihood of ending up homeless because, she wasn't street homeless, but her mom was kind of like, well, you have a girlfriend, you're not welcome in my home. So she was staying with her girlfriend, she was staying with her aunt, with her grandmother, and she was struggling. She wasn't really going to school anymore. She was hanging out with a group of guys who were not a great influence on her. And one day they were skipping school and they were hanging out on a street corner and the cops are pulling up. And one of the guys is like, oh, you're a girl, you won't get in trouble, and tosses her a gun. And she's literally taking the gun, she's trying to shove it in her sleeve as the police officers pull up. So she's caught, red-handed with a gun in her hand. There's no question as to whether or not she was in possession when the police pulled up. And so the Manhattan DA's office, obviously, and we all take guns very seriously. Obviously, it's very serious. We don't want people who are out there using guns. But in terms of a possession case, they're saying, nope, this young woman should go to jail. She should go to prison. We need bail to be set. This is someone who does not deserve an alternative to incarceration. She doesn't deserve anything. Jail, jail, jail. That's all we want. So I recognized that I was making no headway with the DA's office. So I started begging judges, and we went in front of multiple judges, just begging them to offer this young woman, her name was Jessica, an alternative to incarceration. And finally, we came in front of a judge who said, all right, I had found a great program for her, and it's something that in community court, this is exactly what they do. And it was a really good fit for her. And the judge said, all right, I'm going to take a chance on you, Jessica. Like, I'm counting on you to attend this program, to go all the days that you're supposed to go, and to come back here for a year. And by the way, the DA's office was also opposing what's called youthful offender treatment on the case, meaning it wouldn't give her a permanent criminal record because she was 16 years old, 17 years old. And so she would get YO on the case at the end if she was successfully completed. The judge said, I'll give you YO so you won't the rest of your life have a criminal record. And so, of course, we read her the riot act and hoped that she would go. And this program was just extraordinary for her. She was attending more hours than mandated. She became a mentor to other kids in the program. She was re-enrolled in high school. She went to a high school that was really such a good fit for her. If you're familiar with Manhattan Comprehensive High School. So with kids who are, sometimes 18, 19, who are a little bit older. And she was doing great, would come back every month with her update letters, just saying, she was exceeding all requirements and expectations. And I remember when she finally graduated from the program, the judge called us up and was like, I see hundreds of cases a week. And I don't remember all of them, but this one stood out to me. And like, Jessica, I'm so proud of you. And Miss Orleans, thanks for your advocacy. And I was like, no, Judge, thank you for taking a chance on her. This is just so amazing. And she's like, I hope that you'll stay in touch. And I was like, oh, of course. And she was like, Jessica, congratulations, gave her YO, no criminal record. She's like, I don't want to see you back in this courthouse, and Jess and I kept in touch. And about 2 years later, I got a call from her girlfriend saying, hey, Eliza, we know you're super busy. I was like, no, what's going on? How's everything? What's going on? And she's like, well, Jessica's graduating from high school and it would really mean a lot if you could attend her high school graduation. And of course, I was like, I wouldn't miss it for the world. And I called the judge's chambers, got in touch with her law clerk, who got in touch with her, who said, I was like, Judge, I just wanted to let you know, this case, like you set this young woman down a path, and now she's graduating high school and I'm going to go. And the judge was like, do you think they have an extra ticket for me? And the principal heard that we were both coming, asked us to speak at graduation. So with Jessica's permission, I shared her story at her high school graduation. I sobbed as though it was my own kid graduating high school, and got to watch her graduate, and she got a job. I recently attended her baby shower. She and her different girlfriend, but she and her fiance recently went through IVF, had a baby, and she got to cast her vote for me. It was the first time she ever voted. I got her registered to vote. She voted for me in June. And anyhow, it's just her whole life was changed by the fact that, we didn't just think of her life as disposable, that, oh, you know what, she had a gun, she was guilty of gun possession, she should just go to prison. That we could think about this in a way to address the needs that this young individual was facing, to truly set her on a different path, and really to transform not just her life, but the lives of her family members, of her child, of so many people. And she's, by the way, no criminal record. She actually recently passed her test to become an MTA bus driver, which would be such a big deal. They're in need of drivers right now. She drives right now for Access-a-Ride, but being MTA should be union, should be TW Local 100. It's like a phenomenal job with a pension and benefits and everything else. And just really life-changing stuff. So thinking about community court, thinking about ATIs is something that I'm extremely passionate about. So Julia, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, no, thank you for your story. It's just, it's really, yes, is all I can say. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for that question, that amazing story. We got to hear some really positive news, and there is success in second chances, and we've heard it, and hopefully we can hear more of that and learn more of that. I dropped the link to the board about RX Home, their prescription homes, and if anybody want to look into the work they do and partner with them or do some of the work they're doing. Their motto is homelessness is solvable. They had a virtual tour a few months ago throughout the city, a couple of spots in the city. I served with them and helped, advocate about it, and out in the cold for hours with them. And we took people on a virtual tour. It was built. It was beautiful. Whoever created that virtual space for people to walk through and learn about the unhoused. So if anybody want to look into that and maybe get involved, because there's a lot of ways to get involved as well. Next up, Barbara again, Ruta, and then Wendy, our public member, Wendy.
My immunity. Eliza, I just want to say I have tears in my eyes. That was the most emotional story. I want to go back. Oh my gosh, I really was crying through the whole thing. I just want to go back to the homeless situation. I am the co-chair, as Billy had said. We cannot command people to give up NIMBYism. But the one thing I think we can do as a community board, and Sandrea and Sarah, I'd love our committees to work together. We do have a lot of shelters or homeless in our community that we work for. And very often people don't know they exist because they are fine. The WIN project is one that my committee did work on, and I'm so proud of it. Women in need. These are women with children that would be on the street. They have apartments now on 91st and 2nd, Sandrea, right? Between 1st and 2nd. I passed by one time in the summer and they were having an outdoor barbecue and the kids were in the street playing. And I had tears in my eyes then too. So I guess I do it often because these are children that would have been on the street. I visited the women's shelter on Park Avenue, a wonderful shelter that for women that are mentally ill. Nobody complains on Park Avenue because there's no problem. So we even know, Sandrea, you could back up that there was a lot of NIMBYism about the safe haven that will be built. I just was there today. The building will be beautiful. And I truly believe nobody will even know. So I think one thing that we could do as a community board is maybe talk about some of the homeless shelters that we in fact do have, or homeless units that we do have. They're not all shelters. And I think that we can talk to people about, don't worry so much about it being in your backyard, because I think that that is a major problem. Every time we want to build something, there are people that are hysterical about it. So that's my 2 cents. And don't make me cry anymore, Liza. I really was. I'm not kidding.
I'm glad the story was moving for you.
Yeah.
Really special.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that again. And yeah, Sharon, I believe it hit everyone. And the side of humanity, right? If we have some humanity in us, just an ounce, it should have hit you. The place I was talking about on the Upper East Side is called Urban Outreach Center of New York City. That's one of our new food pantries and stuff. And they actually work with the unhoused as well, dinners and so forth, and help get them housing. So I did connect them with someone I knew that was homeless. The next up will be our public member, Wendy. Wendy?
You can unmute, Wendy.
I know Wendy's computer, it often takes her a second for it to register, so.
Can we jump to maybe Andrew and then just unmute her if she gets unmuted, then she can go next? Son Andrew.
I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yep, my computer's slow. I'm so sorry. I want to thank you for an amazing presentation. And I want to say that this may sound irrelevant, but it'll come around in a second. When I was very little and I had tonsillitis a lot, I used to watch Jeopardy and marveled at how people could know so many things in different categories. And now I realize when you get old, you've done a lot of things. So I wanted to say I've worked in criminal court and I worked in civil court in a housing part, and I've also worked in a homeless agency. And so I find tonight's discussion really fascinating and relevant. When I was working in criminal court, I worked for a judge who was kind of a lone ranger in offering alternative sentencing, especially boot camp, but also screening for prostitution for prostitutes in the back of his courtroom. He would line up people to draw blood and administer all kinds of tests. This wasn't common then. I don't know how common it is now. So that's sort of my first question is, what is happening in criminal court in New York City right now in terms of alternative sentencing? And also, what can we do to help to educate judges? I mean, you can obviously go to the state legislature and mandate certain procedural rules, but I think that many judges are just not comfortable or don't know as much about alternative sentencing. So that is part one. Part two, in terms of the, Barbara, I heard you saying NIMBYism, and I think that I definitely attended all of those hearings on the proposed shelter. And many people were very concerned because there was the idea of people from the outside who may have sketchy backgrounds, I don't know how else to put it, visiting the shelter. And I think that if we can address concerns, we don't have people who are living in so much fear. And also, and even more importantly, homeless housing without social services is not worth very much. I mean, it definitely is worth keeping people off of an ice cold street and sheltering them, but you're not really helping them. And so we need to, as a society and as a community, mandate services. And then we're going to have a happy outcome with great neighbors. So, but I do have my question about alternative sentencing. And thank you so much for taking the questions.
Well, first of all, thank you for all of the work that you've done across the board, because it's all so important, housing court and civil court and criminal court. So that's really extraordinary how many years of service that you've given. So thank you. And given that I mean, listen, these are all comments that I've made publicly. So I think that I have been extremely critical of the Manhattan DA's office in the prior administration for their unwillingness to really consider alternatives to incarceration, the really exceptionally cumbersome process they would force, public defenders and our clients and defense attorneys generally to go through in order for them to even consider an alternative to incarceration was obscene and inhumane. They would force clients to come in for multiple proffer sessions and admit to committing crimes, basically, they without contrition and admission of your offense. So essentially preventing someone from then ever future, going to trial, let's say, and testifying in their own defense. They would essentially force admission and then force people to talk about every past trauma, the entire history of their life, sign over HIPAAs and really release every medical record they've ever had, and then comb through those to find any indication that that person was not what they deemed to be worthy of treatment or of an alternative to incarceration. Some of the most devastating cases that I could tell you stories of, but I promised I wouldn't make Barbara cry again. It's would be clients who were not given alternatives to incarceration. One of my most devastating cases that I still, the things that keep me up at night, people say, oh, how do you sleep at night knowing that you represent people who are guilty of crimes? I'm like, no. The things that keep me up at night are the clients who have gone to state prison, regardless of their guilt or innocence, but because of the inhumanity of the criminal legal system. Teenage kids who have been in such desperate need of services, of treatment, of help, and that the DA's office and judges kind of threw up their hands or just said, we don't believe this person to be worthy of alternatives to incarceration. Now, it's only, 3.5 weeks into the new administration, but I think that, in terms of Alvin Bragg's publicly stated policies on what he's not even calling to alternatives to incarceration, which he's calling pathways to success, or I think it's pathways to success. We have a lot of hope. There's a lot of hope because he's no longer requiring these cumbersome processes of proffers and other things. He's saying that he wants to emphasize alternatives rather than incarceration just being the default. So we are hopeful in that regard. There are a lot of things, there's Manhattan Cases New Start program. There are, a lot of things that now exist that are these kind of CCI, the Center for Court Innovation is there. There are these MOCJ and Manhattan Justice Opportunity, the sessions where they are tailored to the individual needs of people rather than just, you're going to do X, Y, or Z, not kind of tailoring it to the person. So it's hard to say overall right now what that's going to look like, but we were feeling a little bit hopeful. I think some bad experiences today, in fact, where there's a new judge taking over the ATI part in Manhattan, who I think now that they see that the DA's office is going to be more collaborative with defenders in terms of allowing for ATIs, they're going to put in place judges who are going to block these things. So we do need advocates across the board helping to make sure that we are calling these things out, saying, not only is it better for the individuals, but it's better for our city if we prevent people from reoffending by providing them with the services and the help that they need.
Can I drill back for one more second and say
Sure.
maybe part of the problem? I had two thoughts as you were speaking. One is, and I don't mean to trivialize this in any way at all, but there are basically analogous statistics to baseball stats for judges, and I know for prosecutors as well. And you're looking for how many cases, if you're a judge, how many cases you dispose of. And so you want a lot of plea bargaining. You certainly don't want all your cases. At least 97% of your cases should be disposed of by plea bargaining, and only up to 3% by trial. Otherwise, you're going to get the really bad assignments. I'm just speaking like insider baseball here.
Oh, it's
and
true.
So those stats prevail. And
we need a different measure of success. We need success to be
right, exactly
measured
right,
by something completely different. Exactly. I'm with you.
Well, and if we can, I mean, one sort of possibility is to look at you spoke very eloquently about some of the economics of what happens when somebody is incarcerated versus returned to home, put in one of these programs where there are high compliance requirements, and then they do well, and how much the taxpayer is saved. So I think if that is also attached to judges and prosecutors, that may be a way out as well. But I also have to say that in terms of judges accepting assignments to parts and really being against the purpose and spirit of the part, I think we need to drill back down to the election process. Normally it's kind of like the old Soviet Union. You're presented with your slate of judges. Listen, many of whom are incredibly fine people who I've known personally and hardworking, really good people. There are not enough judges right now for various reasons. But maybe it's time to actually look at how the balloting process happens and actually make some sort of campaign that makes sense so that people who are accepting certain assignments understand the importance and the severity of those assignments.
Agreed.
Just a thought.
Thank you. Thank you, Wendy and Eliza. We're going to jump to Andrew, and I know you're pressed for time. And Andrew, Rita, and I had a quick question, but I wanted to reserve. You have to get off.
This will be a quick question. I really appreciate you letting me speak, and thank you for all the knowledge that you've shared with us tonight. The question I'm asking you, you talked about kind of like the crime of being poor, and so this may be sort of an adjacent but slightly intersecting discussion. And I don't know how much either knowledge you'll have in this area, but one of the worries that I have right now is that the eviction moratorium is ending soon. And obviously, a lot of people throughout this pandemic have been really economically hurting and struggling. I think the most recent unemployment numbers show that either New York City or New York State, has twice the national rate of unemployment. And I heard Barbara talking about NIMBYism earlier, and I think that can be a problem. But we've had a massive amount of affordable housing loss, rent stabilized loss in our community district. We've lost about 14,000 units since 2007. And we have had a bevy of construction. These big real estate luxury developers knock down these blocks of houses. The residents have either been bought out or they're evicted, and then they build very tall. And it's not affordable, it's market rate. So then they go to the next property, the next series of blocks, to build tall again in the name of affordable housing that ends up not being affordable. And I'm very worried that with the eviction moratorium coming, that luxury real estate developers are probably, licking their chops and they're ready to go and make a pretty penny. And it's going to put a lot of people on the street and they're going to have nowhere to go. And so I don't even know where to begin in terms of making a difference. Is this something a DA looks at? Is this something you go to your city council for? Is this a state legislature question? I know this isn't exactly criminal justice, but it does intersect to, protecting the marginalized and the vulnerable. So if you have any insight or advice, I would appreciate it.
So this, as I said before, when we talked about it, this is slightly outside of my purview in terms of what could really happen. Obviously, we need to prevent the eviction moratorium from expiring. We need to make sure that we allow people to remain in their homes. We need more affordable housing. We need to, provide access to housing and access to affordable housing, and not just put money in the pocket of big luxury real estate developers. But the question of how to do that is something that I am probably not super qualified to answer. So I think I will leave that to the housing committee. I know that you have a wonderful group of brilliant people on this call who can probably direct you in ways that I won't feel that I can. But I do think that all of this kind of does intersect, and it really is about standing up for and fighting for the vulnerable members of our community, and making sure we don't criminalize and use the criminal legal system to address issues that are public health issues.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew and Eliza. And we can unmute Rita. And I will just say, remember a name, Eleanor Bumpers. So evictions can turn criminal. Eleanor Bumpers, 1984 in October, I think October 28th. It was deadly. Thank you. Rita.
Eliza, thank you so much. This is really fantastic. I want to make one little correction that the Wynn building is not a shelter. It is just 100% affordable. But there is a correlation between homelessness, and when I say homelessness, there are people who are living in hotels and motels. I had somebody from Ben Kalos's office pull the numbers for me. The city puts away this kind of money every year, 3,600 hotel and motel rooms. They are charged at $200 a week. It doesn't matter how many people are in the room. So I went out to the Sleep Inn in right over the 59th Street Bridge, and there was a mother and 4 children all sleeping in the same room, all their clothes piled all the way up. If I said to the ceiling, that would be an exaggeration, but 1 foot under the ceiling is not an exaggeration. There's no refrigeration. There is no place to cook. The only place that they could cook was on microwave ovens and there were only 4 for the whole place on a different floor. So look at the expense of buying microwavable food at those dinners or whatever. Those kids end up not going to school. They end up, because they have to travel so far from their regular school, they also are prone to have a greater amount of colds and viruses. So there is we don't break the cycle. That's what I've been doing for so many years. My head does hurt from banging against the wall, but I'm not going to stop. But that's the problem. We don't break the cycle. Of all of the affordable housing, of all of the Mitchell Lamas that were built, the amount of criminality that came out of there was almost zero, because they were all affordable. They're hardworking people. They're all affordable. What we have now is we don't build affordable. Affordable for whom? We have affordable on Roosevelt Island, and it's 185% of the AMI. So if you have $135,000 a year, you get an affordable apartment, and the landlord gets a tax exemption for building this high rent affordable apartment. And we've let them do it. And we're not knocking our heads, all of us together. There has to be a stronger voice. I don't know how much stronger it could be, but if we can stop homelessness, we will stop. At your end, will make your job much easier. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if you need to respond, Eliza, or not.
No, I completely agree. I really appreciate it. And, it's that we need this on all levels. We need this, right. We need action from what Andrew asked before. I realized I didn't respond, but we need action at the city level. We need action at the state level. We need everybody to take action. This has to be, if we're going to show compassion, if we're going to, stand by and say housing is a human right, well, then we need everyone on every level to be participating in making that a reality.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. I know you have to go. I'm going to say a name. And if you can say whatever you need to say in 1 minute to close us down for you to exit, and then we'll continue with our meeting. Khalif Brower.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah. I'm sure everyone is familiar with Khalif Browder's story, but I think that one is one that really does indicate exactly why we have to end cash bail, why we have to end solitary confinement, while we can't allow our elected officials to rename it something so it has like a better PR. Oh, we call it punitive segregation now, and then allow them to continue putting people in solitary confinement, which causes, both physical and mental decompensation. Khalif Browder, unlike Layleen Polanco, didn't die at Rikers Island. He died because of Rikers Island, and he died because of the criminal legal system. And so that blood is on the hands of every DA and politician and and prosecute. You know, it's just across the board that falls on all of us. And we have to just keep fighting for real changes, because Khalif Browder is far from the only one, even though his name has become kind of emblematic, you know, of what all of these problems lead to. And I know his story is very resonant with all of us, and, you know, we'll always remember him. And hopefully in his name and in so many others, we will fight for and achieve real change in our city.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you have to go. It was appreciative.
And everyone feel free to reach out. You know, you all have my contact info. If you want to come watch Night Court, if you want to just ask other questions that we didn't get to tonight, feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'm very accessible, or you can, you know, send me a DM on Twitter. And I'm around. So thank you so much for having me. Thanks for being so engaged and asking such fantastic questions and thinking about these issues. I'm really so grateful for all of you. I grew up on the Upper East Side. I'm not there anymore, but it's, you know, that's my home. We're born and raised. So thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for speaking. It was phenomenal and very needed.
Thanks.
In such a time like this. Thank you so much.
Have a great rest of the night. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Sarah, you want to chime in on anything? And also, I don't know if Erica, I could put you on the spot. I don't know if you want to drop your email in the chat to share it with others. If anybody want to get involved in it's a court watch, so they can contact you. If you put in a chat, then Will or Site, one of our managers and manager, and I don't want to mess up. Will and somebody will put it in the chat so people can contact. Yeah, there you go. It's there. Thank you, Marima. Sarah?
Yeah, I guess I would just say that the research is clear, that the evidence has you know, systematic studies have shown that incarceration is, to use one of Eliza's words that I really like, decompensates communities, and that it doesn't return communities to health. It doesn't strengthen communities. It doesn't strengthen people. And so much of policy is made based on fears that people have. And so I think that today's conversation was great. I loved it. I love hearing from our community and our community board members who have so much compassion and are putting so much thought into these issues, that and I hope that we can continue to be, you know, a voice for the need for compassion and the need to really think about ensuring that policy is based on what the science says. And so and in my workplace, which I am not supposed to raise, but so I won't do it by name, but we've advocated for a long time that that people who are able to get out on bail or are not detained pre-trial are able to help with their cases, because if you're an innocent person, you have no idea how the crime happened, and so pre-trial detention is also how pleas are extracted. And I think something wild, like in New York State, I think it's 97% or greater of cases are resolved by pleas. And which just means that you take a conviction on what you're accused of. And so the more that we allow kind of these coercive instruments in our system, the more quickly cases get disposed, which just generates this increased volume and to feed the machine of conviction. So I really appreciated what Ms. Orleans shared with us tonight, and that, so I guess just that I hope that we can begin to kind of deconstruct a lot of the arguments that are being used in the criminal legal system. And in this committee, I love that we're thinking through like different ideas and getting more information and sharing it with our community, because it's not taking things at face value or the way that the media is portraying it, and really interrogating all of these issues. That's how we're going to get better policies that are more humane and more thoughtful, and as we band together to help our neighbors, that we're helping people. We're helping people because they're people, and finding solutions that honor that humanity. So,
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. Yeah. And in closing, I mean, when we think about plea deals, as Sarah said, and as many know and many do not know, many people plea out because they're inside, or many plea out because they can't afford to pay for a trial, or many plead out because they're told that's their best option because they'll blow trial. Many plea out because of the fact that they'll plea out at the lower court because maybe getting probation or a lighter sentence as to going into the next court, the Supreme Court, and trial. It's more time, you can lose, and it's also a financial burden. But people want to get out of jail, and if they can't afford bail, some people plea out. And if they sit there 6 to 8 months, probably sometimes it's been time served and they get to go home, or they finish a little bit of their time on Rikers or any other holding, jail in the city, in the system, Department of Corrections. So there's a lot of work to be done. Cash bail should be abolished, or, I mean, it's just tough on people that do not have the funding, that are not wealthy. It's not a crime to be poor, but if you go in the system and you're poor, it is a crime. So I'll close on that.
Oh, Sandra, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Can I tell everyone what we're about our meeting next month?
Yeah, and then we'll do that old new.
Yeah.
Oh, go for it.
So February 28th, our next meeting, I'm super excited to share that we are going to have presentations from students at MS 177. So that's Yorkville East Middle School. They're the middle school on top of PS 158. And there's a teacher there, Ms. Rebecca Grodner, who takes the students through research projects on educational equity. And so they're going to be presenting to us on their findings. And I think that most of their projects are based on New York City equity issues. So it's awesome to have students presenting to us, and so I hope that everyone will come so we can show them our support, and I'm sure they will have lots of great answers to questions that we can ask about the issues that they're researching.
Yes. Yeah, and we'll try to have a flyer. Maybe Will can create a flyer for us when we get all the information, so we can kind of get it out there to broaden the meeting even more, because it's going to be some good information, and we need to inspire our youth. This is our future. They're leaders. Yeah. Thank you for highlighting that. So I'm excited. We're looking into March, right? We're looking into March because we have February book. And I'll just like to say that we had Alvin Bragg on when he was a candidate on the One Night podcast a year today. So that popped up in my anniversary on Facebook. So he was interviewed on our One Night podcast. So any old business? Any new business? Motion to adjourn.
We have a second from Rita.
Okay. All right. Thank you all. See you all next month. Thank you for joining our committee meeting.